Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs. I'm Carly Riley, and today on the show, I have Jimmy McNelis, best known to you as jimmy.eth on Twitter and other social platforms. Jimmy is an OG in the space. He is the founder of the Avastars project, which is well known for a number of things, one of which is being an entirely on-chain art PFP project. Jimmy is passionate about on-chain art. If you don't know what that means in the context of this space, you definitely should listen to this episode. I think this is a really interesting ideological, philosophical, technical, I don't know if you want to call it a debate, but I would say topic that those of us who are really deep in NFTs and deep in Web3 and blockchain culture need to be savvy about. I think there are far too many people who don't really understand how the JPEG side of NFTs really work. And I think there should be a much bigger conversation that's being had about it. And credit to Jimmy, who has been facilitating and leading that conversation for many, many months now. So I was really excited to talk about it. And it's super relevant right now because CyberBrokers, which has been like one of the hottest projects of the last few weeks, is an entirely on-chain project. So if you've heard people talking about that in the context of CyberBrokers and wondered what the heck it means, we're going to really break it down in this episode and hear Jimmy's perspective on why it's so incredibly valuable and important, why we should care about it, and hopefully arm you with some talking points that you can use as you explain or onboard other people into the depths of Web3. The other thing that Jimmy and I talk about, and one of the reasons why I felt like this was a really timely moment to have Jimmy on the podcast, is the Yuga Labs acquisition. Jimmy is a huge Apes holder, a huge Punks holder, a huge Meebits holder. He is a deeply relevant person to talk to when it comes to this recent news because he has stakes in all of these communities and is just a strongly opinionated person, which is something I love and admire about him. He has lots of opinions on Twitter that he shares quite openly. He's a bit of a Twitter ranter at times, and so felt like it would be great to really get his thoughts on what's going on here and what he foresees for the future. So we dive into that towards the end of this episode, and it touches on everything, right? Copyright, CCO, rights for holders. Jimmy has some strong thoughts on each of those pieces, so we dive into that as well. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. It does get a bit technical, but I think it's important that we have these conversations. This podcast is about going beyond just the PFPs. What is the underlying technology? What does the future look like? And Jimmy is just a wonderful person to talk to about all of that. So we are going to hear a word from our sponsors, and then, without further ado, my conversation with Jimmy, jimmy.eth, Jimmy McNelis, all names to describe the one and only Jimmy.
POLYGON is Ethereum's largest and most vibrant scaling solution to date. With millions of monthly users and all of the biggest DeFi apps, the POLYGON ecosystem has turned into a blossoming metropolis of DeFi activity. Transactions on POLYGON are quick and cheap, allowing users the freedom to achieve their DeFi goals, all while being economically anchored to Ethereum. But POLYGON isn't just the proof-of-stake sidechain. The POLYGON team is building a suite of scaling solutions, including POLYGON Hermes, Maiden, Nightfall, and Zero, all with different design choices in order to be optimized for all possible crypto use cases. If you're a developer who wants to build on the POLYGON ecosystem, go to the link in the show notes to check out their fantastic documentation. And if you're a user who just wants to experience fast and cheap DeFi, you can bridge over your ETH or other tokens and start playing around with any of the thousands of applications that are available on POLYGON. Everyone is talking about the metaverse these days, and we're all still trying to figure out what it actually is, because everyone is looking for how to get exposure to it. That is why a metaverse index fund is so important, because in such a young market, an index can give you broad exposure to all the various players who are building out all these digital worlds that will ultimately become the metaverse. And that's why you should check out the Metaverse Index from the Index Co-op. The Metaverse Index gives you simple, easy, and safe one-click exposure to the emerging open metaverse trend. The MVI Index contains some of the biggest metaverse projects out there, including Axie Infinity, Decentraland, Illuvium, and more. So join thousands of holders who have already trusted nearly $50 million to the MVI index. And if you buy $500 of MVI on the Dharma app, you can receive $50 worth of ETH on the POLYGON network. There's a link in the show notes for you to click so you can get started on your journey into the metaverse.
Hello everyone, GM. Welcome back to another episode of Overpriced JPEGs, an especially special episode of Overpriced JPEGs, as I think it's my first in-person interview. Jimmy McNelis here with me, known as jimmy.eth on Twitter. I'm so excited you are going to be my first in-person guest. We're here in Austin for South by Southwest, and this is perfect timing. We are going to talk about on-chain art, super relevant given the CyberBrokers, I'll call it a phenomenon happening, but you really ushered that in with your project Avastars, which we'll dive into. And then, of course, major Yuga Labs news this week that I'm very excited to get your thoughts on as a major, Punks, Ape, and Meebit holder. I feel like we could have no better person to provide their perspective. So thank you for being here, Jimmy.
Carly, it's an honor and exciting. I'm your first in-person guest. What an honor.
I know. I don't think I've had anybody in the studio. I have a studio in New York I have access to, but I have yet to have anybody in there. So yeah,
COVID changed things, right?
I know.
So now we're kind of recovering from that a little bit. I think we've all either caught it once or twice. So.
Yeah. Yep. Only once on my end, but came close, I think, to twice. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just start with your background. For anybody who doesn't know, you're like wildly OG in this space, and let's kind of level set for folks there who you are.
Sure. So I got started in the technology space in 2007, working as a partner of Google's. I was setting up at the time Gmail for businesses, basically. I did that until about 2013, and then took a couple years off. Tried to figure out what the next trend in technology was going to be, and even though like Bitcoin and Ethereum were like kind of right in front of me the whole time, I was completely missing it. I ended up hitting the woods. I went to the Appalachian Trail and attempted to hike that entire trail. It's 2,250 miles. I ended up making it about 750 miles in the end, and one of the reasons I came off the trail is because one day I was talking to one of my fellow hikers, and he was telling me that he was making money while he was walking down the trail, and I asked him how, and of course, and he said that he was mining Bitcoin. And then he told me the price of Bitcoin, and it was like 10 times more than the last time I had heard the price of Bitcoin.
Is this like 2015 you're hiking?
It's 2017, sorry. This is like April 2017. Okay. And so in May, 100 miles later or so, I couldn't stop thinking about, the fact that this was the next trend in technology, blockchain. And I got off the trail and eventually built my own mining rig that year. And then CryptoKitties came out in December 2017. I actually was a little late to claim the Punks, which came out, I think, in June of 2017. But I
late to claim the Punks, but still claiming them in 2017 is a big win.
Right. But when I could have bought Punks all day long for 0.05 ETH, but instead I was breeding CryptoKitties at the time. Yeah. So I spent a couple years breeding CryptoKitties, and then launched my own project, Avastars, in February 2020, and that was the first intentional profile picture project, I believe. We set out because we wanted people to be able to market our project by setting their profile picture, because that's like your great real estate for the metaverse. And we also stuck the art and the metadata entirely on chain. We made them actually breedable. They're composable. You can make new Avastars out of existing Avastars, more or less.
Replicant factory. We'll talk about that.
Yep. And then I continued to collect in the space and continued to build and grow some businesses. We have Nameless, which is a minting platform. We did Gary V's VFriends. We worked with Sotheby's. We've done a couple other amazing projects with like Des Bryant, and most recently we did a omakase restaurant in New York where we helped a restaurant fund their entire existence with an NFT sale, and then those NFTs act as a membership token to be able to eat there on a regular basis.
Is this Flyfish Club?
Yes.
It's with Gary Vee as well.
Yeah, Flyfish Club.
Very cool.
Yeah, all right. You know all about it. All right.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and I've continued to collect along the way. You mentioned, that I have some Bored Apes and some Meebits and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm really like just fortunate that I'm able to do something as a career that I happen to just love doing day in and day out, no matter what. So I'm a degenerate NFT collector for sure.
Degen to your core. So Avastars will be what we dive into, but I do want to ask, so you're on the Appalachian Trail, somebody mentions Bitcoin, you're like, oh, the price has gone up since I last heard, this is the next big trend in technology. What was it that was like the click for you so early?
Yeah, well the click there, you almost hit it, is that like I was familiar with Bitcoin when like Mt. Gox got hacked and everything, and I remember like it was like $400 to $600 in that range. I think it was like $600 for a Bitcoin, and then it dropped down to maybe in half, and I was like, oh, that's it. It's over. This is what I expected to happen. Why I never like bought any of this stuff. And then when the guy was on the trail, like I think he said the price was like 4,000 or something. And I was like, oh my God, it's 10x in a couple years. Like there's something really significant here. It's got past that Mt. Gox issue. And that was like the first like spark, really.
Yeah.
It was like that. And then once I learned about Ethereum and learned like that I could mine it with video cards, I built my own mining rig. I was a gamer, so I'd built a computer in the past. But then learning smart contracts were there, and then the NFTs themselves. Like once I like bought my first CryptoKitty, that was the beginning of the journey that I'm on now, because that's where I realized like all of my experience playing video games and collecting growing up and doing everything else was kind of getting ready to come into the internet world in a big way in the form of Web3 and NFTs and everything else. So
yeah, okay, that makes sense. I feel that way, and I was much later than you, but I was into like, I knew about Ethereum in 2017, thought it was interesting, like understood what its potential might be, but was like, who knows if that'll happen. And then when I circled back at the very beginning of last year and started learning about DeFi, I was like, oh, they're doing it. Like they're actually building this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, like it's so helpful, I think, if you had that early seed of interest.
Yeah.
And then when you circle back and realize there's been growth, you're like, oh, well, now I'm all in.
But so often, and this will lead into the Avastars story as well, but so often is the case is like we learn about something new and we misunderstand what it is.
Yeah.
And we like think it's something much cooler than it is, or it does something much different than it does. In this case, like the blockchain, and I think is actually doing a lot of what people think. And once the concept of blockchain is kind of hard to grasp at the moment for new people coming in. But once you get it, and then it's like, oh, it has all this potential and possibility. And with CryptoKitties, like I saw a lot of potential and possibility, but I also thought that they were stored on the blockchain. They were like the cats are on the blockchain, and I thought that meant that the art and the metadata, I thought that because it was an NFT, that meant that it was all stored there. And it was like this extreme potential store of value as a collectible, because as long as Ethereum's there, they would be there. Now I learned a couple months later that that wasn't exactly the case.
And that's really what you tried to rectify then.
Yes.
With Avastars. So you kind of have said this, but I'll say like the two things that I think about when I think about why Avastars are so distinct is they really like predated or like set off the PFP trend in some ways, which I don't think people realize. It really was like the first kind of PFP intentional project.
Sure, people were using punks and occasionally a cat, but cats don't really make great profile pictures on social media.
And neither Larva Labs or Dapper necessarily set out for those to be PFPs. Like you
I think
specifically
CryptoPunks was like an art project, if anything, right?
And it was so much earlier, and it was literally just like, how can we put something interesting on the blockchain that isn't just a currency? Like that's how I think of it almost. And and Avastars, you were like, no, this is going to be intentionally something people can use to represent their digital identity. So that was huge. And then of course the on-chain component, which is like what we'll totally dive into. But so give folks the Avastar stories now, and what is Avastars, and whatever you want to say on that, and we'll dive into on-chain.
Sure, yeah. So with Avastars, once I realized that the CryptoKitties did not have the art stored on the chain, and that the information that's stored about them is not in a human readable form, the genetics of them, which is stored on chain, and that's what allows the kitties to be able to be bred together, and you can create new cats. That's a form of composability, which we'll jump into later, is taking two CryptoKitties. They have underlying DNA genetics. You decide, I want to breed these two, and then there's an algorithm that kicks out a new kitty based on those underlying parental genetics. That's a form of composability. You take two NFTs and create a new one that's based on the characteristics of those. But I also wanted to like make sure that if I played through the thought experiment in my head where like Dapper Labs wasn't around in 50 years, and I'm willing and bequeathing my CryptoKitties to a family member, and they get the NFT, and it's just a character string on a blockchain, and they have no idea what I just gave them, and it's probably not worth anything as a result.
So let me break that down, because I think what you're describing there is this DNA code, right, which leads to the breeding. That's in the case of CryptoKitties, that actually is on the smart contract.
Yeah.
But the image itself, the JPEG, right, is stored. Is that an IPFS thing?
No, they didn't even use IPFS.
Okay.
They just decided to store it locally on their servers.
Okay. So, and this is the piece that I do think there's a lot of misconception about. The picture itself is stored on a server. If that server goes down, that image, which we consider really what the CryptoKitty is now gone.
I mean, potentially you could recover it in some ways, but yes, it's gone.
Okay.
The original source, what the NFT points to, is a place on their server, and that is gone, and there's no backup of that image anywhere on the blockchain.
And so when you breed a CryptoKitty, you've got two DNA sequences, and then you can breed them, which gives you a new DNA sequence, which is like a generative art thing, right?
Yeah.
It tells it what the new kitty should look like.
Yep.
But then that new kitty that emerges, again, stored on a local server.
And
so that's how that kind of works.
interpreted by the CryptoKitties, by Dapper Labs, and then served as an image. Like they have an algorithm that decides that. Yeah. And then it's possible that, like, there's enough information out there that the community could recreate what all those genetics are and everything else, but it'd be a lot of effort. And yeah.
Okay, so you see that and you're like, I want to be able to, if I want to give this to my kid.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't right? Like, I was like, hold on a second, because I talked about, like, often technology is, like, not as cool as you think it is, or you misunderstand, right? And so for me, I had this misunderstanding that the cats were stored on the blockchain. So then I couldn't let go of that thought. Like, why aren't they? And, like, can't they be stored on the blockchain in some way? So I debated some folks for the better part of a year about this. And then I think it was May 2019, Autoglyphs by Larva Labs launched. And they actually did put ASCII character art on chain. It's a 64 by 64 character grid, kind of a simplistic expression of art, but this was the way that they figured out how they could actually store the metadata and the images on the blockchain. So that came out, and I was like, and I had just a couple months earlier had the epiphany on how I would do this.
Okay.
And that was because the wonderful folks at OpenSea had created a project called ETHmoji, and they're basically emoji characters that you can compose yourself as NFTs. And the way you do that is you go to the website, and they have all these different layers. They'll have a body layer, like one of them's an eggplant. One of them's just a red circle, you know, and then they have hats and eyes and mouths and ears and accessories. And you can assemble it the way you want. And then when you decide that's the one you want, you mint it, and that creates it, and you get that NFT in the way you wanted it to look, which I thought was cool. And I was like, whoa, did they store the individual layers on the blockchain? Because if they did, and you composed them all together this way, like, you don't have to store the entire image on the chain because you have all this individual pieces
are there.
And all you have to do is figure out how to assemble those. And so you could, like, have 10 components stored and make some, like, 100 or more combinations of unique images out of just like this. So anyways, that was kind of the epiphany for me. I looked, they didn't store those things on the blockchain at all. They had a cool thing where, like, an individual actually owned each individual layer and could set their own price for the layer. There was some cool other stuff there, but for me, it was the composability of these individual SVG layers on the blockchain that, like, was the idea. And then Autoglyphs launched, and that's when I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I sold my home, I borrowed some money from my mom, I went and found some artists and a developer. Actually, Josie was one of the first people, we're gonna talk about CyberBrokers later. Josie was one of the first people I discussed this idea with at the time.
Wow.
And we mulled on it and figured out how it could look and how it could work. And I ended up working with a different set of artists. So it was an amazing couple out of Brazil, Marmota and Milky. And went and hired my developer, Cliff Hall, to do the development, and then we got to work, the four of us got to work over the course of the next, really took about 9 months to get to our Genesis founder sale, and then it took another 2 months to get to our actual Series 1 launch and everything else. But a little bit over a year after I saw Autoglyphs, Avastars existed.
Amazing. Okay, and so to break this down for folks, so you have all these traits, like functionally how this works, right? And based on everything you described, you have all these, avatars have different traits, and each of those individual traits, these SVG files themselves are stored on the blockchain. And then there's an algorithm that knows how to put them together in ways to create the image that we all see. Is that how that works?
Yeah, we call that an SVG sandwich.
Okay.
So the way, yes, it's exactly what we did. So there's, I'm not gonna remember the exact number, but for physical traits plus color palette, there was something about 630 traits total for Avastars. And most of those are either a hexadecimal code for color, or it's a SVG code snippet for that individual trait that's drawn. And then basically what we do is we layer them in a specific order.
And like specifically like eyes, nose, hair, earrings, like those are the traits we're describing that then get layered on top of each other to create the look of a
face shape,
human.
right? Yeah. Hair color, eye color, background pattern. There's 12 in all that every Avastar has. And then the smart contract, basically there's a field in the smart contract that's like render Avastar. And if you put your Avastar or any Avastar ID number in there, it will actually kick out the full SVG code for that Avastar. You can copy and paste that, save that as an SVG file, or just paste that code directly into a browser, and you're gonna see your Avastar displayed there. And that's rendered directly from the blockchain, kind of in real time. on demand rather. It's not stored there. Each one's information isn't stored, it's rendered. So we're not taking up more space for each individual Avastar. We only took up the storage space for the individual traits one time.
And then it can be rendered elsewhere. But this means if NFT 42, like if you guys go away, anybody can go back to the blockchain and just using the blockchain render their Avastar.
That's just on the smart contract. Yep, they don't have to do anything else. And that was the mind experiment too, like the thought experiment too. When I'm gone, how do we make sure that these things are still there? These are my pyramids. So that was the idea.
So you're incredibly passionate about the importance of on-chain art. And on-chain, I think, beyond art, I mean, we'll get to maybe royalties on-chain and things around that I think are really interesting. Obviously, reason number one is like the legacy element of it. If you disappear, how can you make sure this still survives? Are there other reasons why you think it's really important that things be done like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one, like we've started to see the argument out there that people, like I was worried ahead of time that people were going to be like, why you're using an immutable ledger that has like forever storage, but you're not storing any of this stuff on there. Like this is like a LARP. It's not real.
Like you mean like skeptics to blockchain? I think of like the problem with NFTs. If you saw that video, he hammered that point. He's like, this art isn't even stored on chain. It's all a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, and people even give Avastars crap for that because we have a URL that points to our website as like the way to serve up the API. But ours is actually backed up on the blockchain itself. It's just really important to me from a value perspective. Like I had spent a lot of money on CryptoPunks. So for me, it was kind of like trying to make sure that what I had spent significant time and resources on up to the point that I decided things needed to be on chain, that I was creating something that when people who came after me saw, they wouldn't have the same objections. So I was trying to remove objections that I saw coming in the future for that. And similarly with on-chain royalties as well, right? Like trying to remove objections and provide some sort of like value add on top of what had already been created. Like Punks did some cool stuff by like introducing this idea of digital assets, and then CryptoKitties did the standard of, ERC 721, an NFT standard that exists. And then I just wanted to basically improve from there and say, well, like we can make these things actually better in some way by sticking them on chain and making them even more trustless and making them even more secure and providing a real starting point for value creation, I guess, in collecting.
Yeah, so from a collectible standpoint, I think it makes all the sense in the world. This is obviously like a superior form of a collectible than one that like is sort of piecemealed together, where maybe it's on IPFS and that node could, nodes could go down and you lose it, or or AWS, even worse, whatever, right? Are there also like functional benefits as you think about like the metaverse getting built out? Like how does like something and I think this also gets us into other versions of composability that like actually just make this what we're going to need to do for the metaverse to become its best version of itself.
So let's like, yes. So it's very important because of like the trustless nature of on-chain. When you stick something on-chain, you don't have to anymore trust a third party serving that information up. And granted, IPFS is similar, it's decentralized. The IPFS hash is unique. If someone can confirm that that's a valid hash for that project, you can also similarly interact with data, sometimes in a trustless way. However, you're having to then look somewhere else off the blockchain to do it instead of being able to do it at the same primitive level that the blockchain itself is. So when you create a CryptoKitty, for example, that smart contract is only reading the genetic string of the two CryptoKitties on the blockchain and then creating based off of that. It's not going out and looking at Dapper Labs servers or anything else. Similarly with an Avastar, when you create an Avastar replicant out of Avastar primes, you can take 12 traits from 2 to 5 Avastars and create a new one. When you're doing that, you're doing it direct. You're interacting with the smart contract directly to do this, and it's on the blockchain and it's trustless. There's no looking outside to outside data or anything else. So it's efficient in one regard because all the information is contained in the same system and you're not relying on external systems. But then it's also trustless because it's been created in a way that's verifiably scarce, and the traits, once they're used, they can't be used again. So the smart contract goes and checks and sees if those traits have been used. So the whole thing just kind of works elegantly together when everything is in one place. When you start storing things in different locations and different places and have other dependencies, there's more opportunity for, one, for things not to work exactly how you would want them to work from a technology perspective, but two, if, for example, somebody was doing a similar project but stored all of their trade information on their own server and didn't use IPFS or any of those things, how in the future could Decentraland issue you a token based on some trait characteristics on your NFT without being able to like know that?
They'd have to like go to your server essentially. Is that
right?
They'd
have to trust that like that data could be manipulated or changed, and like some nefarious characters could come in and like maliciously take control of some obscure project and that had some sort of access into some other entity and composability and could change some of that data and then manipulate this other system. I mean, I'm kind of giving an obscure example here.
Part of what I'm hearing is like if Decentraland has to go and interact with a foreign server it doesn't know, that foreign server could also be in the hands of a bad actor who could be messing with things in all sorts of negative ways, as opposed to interacting with a smart contract on the blockchain that has that sort of trustless, we all can read.
Exactly. Decentraland can go in and look at the Avastars contract and know that this color trait is available for this NFT and that this user has elected to use that color trait in their building materials or their paint in Decentraland. I'm just making shit up now. Mm-hmm. But that can be done in a way that not only you can go back, an individual who had some knowledge could go back and piece that back together and show the proofs that all of this is validly interacted with and it's authentic. So it's easier to close the loop and prove authenticity of like the composable elements if it's all on chain.
So I want to ask one final question that's sort of deep in this technical weeds that I'm sure is like breaking people's brains, because mine is breaking a little bit. No, yeah. I think this is really important. I think it is actually so important though that people understand things at a technical level like this. Mm-hmm. If they're going to be trading and like spending money in this space. So here's a question, and it's more like, am I right in this, or are there workarounds to this? But like when I think about the metaverse and I think about digital identity, and I think about what Doodles is doing with Space Doodles, and I've talked to Jordan Castro, and I think what's so interesting is they're starting to demonstrate ways that you can express different versions of yourself through your characters. Mm-hmm. And when I think about, so CryptoKitties, there was a faction of, I think, early CryptoKitties holders that did like hat on cats, right? Where they were able to, kind of put hats on individual CryptoKitties.
Yes.
When I think about what you did with Avastars and this kind of composability question, it strikes me, and this is where I need you to correct me or not, that, for example, if I love my Avastar, but I want to reflect myself a little bit differently than that character, or take a character where maybe I want to change her outfit or something. Is it easier to do that if basically all these constituent components, right? The shirt is a separate layer from the hair is a separate layer from whatever, and instead of those separate layers being rendered together as a JPEG and put on IPFS, each of those individual components are now in a smart contract. I could write a smart contract to interact with that, take those constituent components, but then swap out, so I'm now wearing the band t-shirt that I want my character to wear. Is that made much easier sort of in the way you're doing things? Or no, is that like not necessarily one of the benefits here?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So yes, in that that's how it should be.
Okay.
Is exactly how you described it. Where like I think if what you were saying, if I'm picking up on that, like you have an Avastar with let's say steampunk goggles, and you want to use that in maybe some other project even, like, and create a new NFT from that, right? And ideally, that's how that would work.
Okay.
At the time when we created Avastars, there was an internal debate about this, and this is a debate I lost. I wanted to do the traits as a public good so that they were just all available there. Okay. We would still have the rights over them individually, but like let people compose new things out of them. Cliff made a really good argument at the time that it was going to degrade the Avastars Generation 1 brand if we allowed other people to create assets that were using the same assets that we created the Gen 1 with. So as a result, right now, only an administrator account has access to the individual trait layers as far as like rendering them from the blockchain. Mm. Now, some really smart people, including Kai, our friend Kai, and another guy, Delens, community members, they've gone in and recreated and pulled the assets and made it so that you can go in and at least see like how you could create your own Avastar out of these traits. But right now, the only way to actually get the art from the original Avastar Prime NFT into a new NFT, the art itself, is to make a replicant, because the replicants are authorized to use those traits. If somebody was to take a hair color from from an Avastar and use it in another project, they could do that and actually interact with our smart contract and burn the trait, and you can prove all that's done. The one thing they're not going to be able to do is access that art to do it. So that's the part that we kind of didn't get completely right there on that part, but that's what I want to see happen. And I'm curious if CyberBrokers has done something like that.
Okay, so but that's helpful, I think. I mean, I followed that. Hopefully other people follow that. But it in theory, again, as we look at like what is the metaverse
we need to write
like?
so we need to write another smart contract, which we may or may not get around to open up those trait layers inside the visual trait layers inside of our contract and allow other people to do it through some form of a proxy contract.
And it's not just about, hey, I want to grab these Ethereum earrings that are maybe, you know, that an Avastar has and put it on another thing, but it could also be, what if I create my own earrings that I want to put on my Avastar? Like, I think it kind of, I'm interested in both ways.
Yes, I mean, that would be like a derivative project in a sense, but you could absolutely do that. You own it, you have the commercial rights to your Avastar, like you have the ability, there is this composability aspect, so yes.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is even backing up from Avastars, like in theory, this is a really interesting way for the metaverse and for our digital identities to unfold, and this would be the way you would want to see it happen. Again, the changing clothes piece, like, you know, all these things that are going to be relevant to how are we projecting ourselves when we're running around the metaverse. Like, you would like to see that all sort of on-chain for a whole variety of reasons.
Yes, and the visual aspects and the token, the cool composable elements and everything. And eventually I'd love to see, you know, in a, you know, encrypted fashion, I'd love to see our identities actually be on-chain as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is just the first iteration of that. Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about on-chain royalties because I think this is another area where there's a tremendous amount of misconception, which is that right now, as artists talk about secondary sales and like how critical that is to their future, that's right now happening at the platform layer for the most part. It's OpenSea is allowing that, not smart contract layer.
It's a little bit of both, but since the predominant amount of sales actually happen on the OpenSea layer, and OpenSea, I don't know if they are yet, but they haven't up to this point like supported the on-chain royalty standards, even though they've advised businesses like my own which ones to use as far as like 18 months ago maybe. They have not actually adopted the on-chain standards, so that you have to go in and manually put in your royalty amount as the owner of that contract in the OpenSea platform in order to capture secondary royalties there.
Okay, why? Can you explain for folks? Because I do think this is so core. What people think is so great about this is like, oh, the smart contract says the artist will get 10% royalty, but like that's not where it's happening. And why is that not happening there?
I think that one, like,
will we get there?
Yes, we will. So I think OpenSea made the decision that they didn't like the standards that exist already and weren't ready to like bet on one. I think that was a huge mistake, honestly. Like, they spent a ton of time building in layer 2 and all these other things, but like adding in like on-chain royalties when Rarible did it. I think even like Looks Rare and some of the others have done it. Like, other people have done it, and they're supposed to be leading the way, and they completely dropped the ball.
And what you're describing there is basically you would set a royalty within the smart contract. And what OpenSea has said is they don't like that standard. So OpenSea isn't going to
I think they've been creating their own
contract
along with some other companies. I'm a little disappointed they didn't like involve us in it, since we were actually the first platform to introduce on-chain royalties through like our nameless platform, which was at the time called Infinity. But my understanding is they have been working on a standard with some other entities, and there's a couple other standards in development. One approach is you have like a database that stores all these things, and you go and look up through the database smart contract references that other smart contract, goes and looks up this database and sees the royalties. It's like another ledger. The approach that we have taken up to this point with a lot of our stuff, and what we did first was we created basically a way to put an address of the creator, and then basis points, like how much percentage of a sale they were going to get, and you just basically send that amount to that address whenever there's a transaction. There was a platform briefly called Cargo that a gentleman named Sean developed, and he came out with something a little bit further developed than what we had done. And we had adopted that standard once we started to see industry support for that. And many of the smart contract developers today that are incorporating standards are incorporating that. I forget what the EIP on that is, but they're incorporating that standard. But there are a couple others now that are trying to come out with like these either alternative ways, which may work. These like they're like not centralized, they're a decentralized but central place to store these royalty informations. And the idea is that this is like a kind of similar to ENS, where you can point to a place to look and see what these royalties are. You could point to any number of places, so you don't have to have it in. You don't have to trust OpenSea if OpenSea is running this registry. You could trust Manifold or Nameless or somebody else, or some conglomerate or some DAO.
Okay, so the crux of that is we will get there. So much of, I think, what is right now is just
on-chain royalties was
reality
unfortunately not the focus of the OpenSea platform.
Right.
They focused more on like layer 2 NFTs, and so instead we got a bunch of spam.
Axie Infinity is a game universe filled with cute, fascinating little creatures called Axies that players can collect as pets. Players aim to battle, breed, collect, raise, and build kingdoms for their Axies. There are and will be many varied gaming experiences for Axies, many of them having players compete with each other using complex strategies and tactics to attain top rankings or be rewarded with coveted resources. Others will have them complete quests, defeat bosses, and unlock in-depth storylines. There are countless unique Axies that players can collect with varying body parts and experiences. The Axie universe is a player-owned economy where the players can truly own, buy, sell, and trade the resources they earn in the game through skilled gameplay and contributions to the ecosystem. It's a digital nation where people come together globally with their Axies to play, earn, and live. Join the Axie revolution at axieinfinity.com/bankless. Unstoppable Domains is the #1 provider of NFT domains. With domains ending in .crypto, .x, or .nft, Unstoppable Domains lets you replace your long, complex wallet address with a human-readable address. Using Unstoppable, you can verify the ownership over your NFTs, log into Web3 apps, and join tens of thousands of people using them as their Twitter usernames. With Unstoppable Domains, you can have all of your crypto addresses registered to one single domain. So it doesn't matter where crypto payments are coming from or where they're going. By registering all of your crypto addresses to your Unstoppable domain, all of that is taken care of in the back end. Better yet, with Unstoppable Domains, you don't have to worry about gas costs or renewal fees because you own it. Buy your domain and you can show it off as your new Twitter username. So you can get your name for as low as $5 at unstoppabledomains.com.
Okay. Right before we get to CyberBrokers and maybe the evolution that is in this kind of long chain that you set off, I think explain why this isn't common, because this isn't. You're almost unique in this, right? CyberBrokers is almost unique in this. Pretty much no other projects do this sort of on-chain composability thing with their art. My understanding is it's expensive because it takes up a lot more block space. But maybe say a little bit as to why that hasn't happened.
Yeah, so one, there's a couple of reasons. There are a couple other projects. There was one that came out last year called On-Chain Monkeys that kind of tried to.
And Chain Faces, is that on chain?
Chain Faces, of course. And Chain Faces came out a couple weeks before Avastars did.
Oh, they front run ya.
Well, not really.
But they're not like it's not picture, right?
Well, it was Nate.
Okay,
it was my buddy Nate, and Nate was
Alex.
like hand in hand with me, helping like with ideation and stuff around Avastars. So like we were working and helping each other. Nate actually felt bad. He didn't want to label his project as a PFP because he wanted Avastars to be able to be the first on-chain.
Well, and they're not.
PFP.
You know, like Avastars, if you look at the art versus like a Chain Faces art,
yeah,
it's like these are not.
Yeah, you have like
the
simple, like exactly, smileys versus like actually SVG art. It is cost prohibitive. So when we did it, I think we got all of our 650 traits or whatever on chain for less than 5 ETH. I don't remember the exact, somewhere between 5 and 8 ETH. It was several $1,000s. It was not a lot of money. CyberBrokers just spent 91 ETH to put all of their traits on chain. Like just did it like yesterday or something. So, you know, the difference back then, like when we did it, Ethereum cost like 250 bucks, something like that. And now Ethereum's 10 times more. So it was like 10 times more. The Ethereum cost 10 times more, and they had to use at least 10 times more Ethereum
to do it. Yeah.
So like, you know, it's 100x more right now to do what.
Do you think that cost will come down? Like, is your expectation that in the future this will be the way things are done, and because of whether it's L2s or whatever it is, the cost of putting things on chain coming down enough, or is that just fundamentally
I
not
don't
really
necessarily.
feasible?
I think that like it is always going to be somewhat cost prohibitive to put things on chain, but it's a commitment that you make for like the reasons you do it would be because you want to like preserve your project for a really long time. It's an intentional step and signal for that matter to collectors that there's something more like to this than the traditional collections. Because another reason we haven't seen a lot of this is because by and large, the collector community has shown that they don't care about on-chain. Like as far as like assigning value to a project, it's more about like the memes and like whatever's popular and whatever people are talking about. The technology aspect of it is not understood by a lot of collectors initially, and also like some really just don't care at all. Like when I buy an NFT, I'm generally buying something that I don't mind, or maybe that I want to have for a long time. Since the beginning of last year, a lot of collectors in the space really learned about NFTs because it was a money-making opportunity. You know, you have to understand, like most of us.
They were trying to flip. You were buying when it wasn't.
Yeah, we were buying to collect. Yeah, you were just
like
losing money. Like I probably put $200,000 into breeding CryptoKitties over 2 years. You know, like of my own cash, just like buying Ethereum and then, you know, buying CryptoKitties and breeding CryptoKitties. You know, it wasn't a money-making opportunity for most of us. It was literally like, well, we're here for the tech.
A labor of love.
Yeah, I mean, it was crypto winter, and like, you know, no one wanted to buy our stuff. We were the greater fools. But then everybody that came in last year, like they paid attention to NFTs because they're like, oh wait, people are making some serious money off of this. So it becomes about the flip and the shorter term opportunity. And for that, like, who cares if it's on chain? You know, if that's all, like from the mindset of a collector, like who cares? If I'm just going to sell this thing in a few weeks for 10 times more, or try to, that's the idea, then they don't care. But then you saw projects like Bored Apes, which it wasn't initially, it was on IPFS, nothing's on chain, but then they went and took some of the funds that they got from their sales and actually stuck the art on, I don't know if it's all the way on Ethereum, but I think it's on Arweave. Yeah, I think it's pinned to Arweave. And you're starting to see more and more projects that are gonna be here for the long haul, that are thinking through this strategy a little more and thinking through, you know, sticking it on chain. Another advantage of putting it on chain is that, you know, you don't have to worry about maintaining that backup server for that in the long run, right? So it can be, you know, in the case of CyberBrokers, 91 ETH is a lot of money. I didn't do the math yet, but it's a lot. Maybe like $220,000 or something. There's probably, the server costs are probably going to be lower over the course of 20 years than that. But, you know, for us, for Avastars, like we spent a couple grand, and like having that stuff there forever is definitely a cost benefit. Now, a lot of projects still need to serve their art and things like that. We look at the blockchain as a backup. We don't look at it as the primary place that you should be, you know, serving your art to your customers and things like that. The part that CryptoKitties got right is they were serving the art images directly from their website. The part they got wrong was they didn't store a backup on the blockchain. In my opinion, that's what they got wrong.
And let's actually do this quickly. I think you've got a spectrum here, right? Where you have like totally on-chain, something like what an Avastars has done.
Yeah.
Then you have like, you know, I'm serving the image in my own server that could go down, or like AWS, some centralized server. And then as you kind of move towards the middle of these two extremes, you have like probably an IPFS storage thing, and then you have Arweave as like the next step closest to on-chain.
Yes.
Can you explain what that actually means in that spectrum for folks?
Sure. So, I mean, you know, CryptoKitties is a good example of, you know, there's a minimal amount of stuff stored on-chain. And there's NFTs that are worse than that have nothing stored on-chain. Initially, when you mint an OpenSea, open storefront contract, it's literally an empty vessel. You cannot identify anything about the NFT itself if you look at the NFT at the blockchain layer. So that's like the worst case. Now, they allow you to add your stuff to IPFS and then pin it to Arweave, I believe, at least add it to IPFS at a later date if you, the user, want to pay to do that, to back your creation up. Next step will be CryptoKitties. Just stores some trade information, but no visual information. The next step would be something like what Bored Apes launched with, where they had an IPFS link to the apes. They had a hash and everything else. You could go out and in a system prove that these were the correct traits for this, but it wasn't stored directly on the blockchain. You can't render trade information from the blockchain. And then they added, you can pin the IPFS hashes to Arweave now. So Arweave is a blockchain that that claims that you're able to store something once for up to 200 years or more. You pay once and store forever, as far as like our lifetimes are concerned. So now you can take IPFS links and pin them to Arweave. And really, for other than the part where I was talking about earlier, the efficiency of being able to interact with within the same vessel, having all of the composable elements on the same blockchain, you do have some form of on-chain when you store things on Arweave, because it's a blockchain, the information's stored there. You should be able to piece it back together through the information in the smart contract and recreate that experience somehow with effort. So that's a form of on-chain. It's not as strong as like that last step, which is something like autoglyphs, Avastars, and crypto CyberBrokers. Like those are actually stored. The art and the metadata are stored 100% on the blockchain. There's no external dependencies. And that is where like the strongest possible, like you literally, as long as there's one node of Ethereum running in 500 years, you could go back and piece together any of those projects like completely from the smart contract.
You know Josie. We're talking about CyberBrokers, which has been a super popular project of the last few weeks. Can you speak to, I would love to get your opinions on CyberBrokers. I'm assuming you're quite bullish on them, but also speak to sort of Josie making the decision to put CyberBrokers entirely on chain.
Yeah.
Would love to hear that.
So, I mean, her and I got to know Josie in like that May 2019 timeframe. I got introduced to crypto voxels through Josie and started collecting Josie's art. She's an amazing artist. So for the last couple of years, her and I have had discussions and debates on these topics and the importance of on-chain and everything else. And she's one of the people who cared, I guess, like when I started talking about it, understood the value of it. And when she decided she wanted to do her own project, she basically said she wanted to also do it on chain. I think like Josie comes from a time before I even joined crypto. I came in 2017. Josie comes from the Bitcoin world. I think she was probably here in like 2014.
And she was doing crypto art. She was doing like art around, like real IRL art around like Bitcoin and like getting big on Reddit.
She's an amazing
like,
artist.
She's just like,
I mean, if it's not obvious from her project, but like her art is amazing as well. Yeah, and she has like that more decentralized ethos and everything about her than even like myself coming in as a noob and not really knowing like all of the cultural aspects of Bitcoin and blockchain and the libertarianism and all of those things. But so she very much, I think, understood that the potential of the technology, and when Avastars came out and did the on-chain stuff, she like realized like, wow, I could probably do that too. And then her and Ben, Cyber guys, who came from like Neon District, like I guess they've been working on this for over a year. And that's the other thing is I've had awareness and I've known they've been working on this and I've been excited about it because I knew they were doing it on chain. I knew it was going to be Josie's take on chain and like avatars, like what those were going to look like for like her version of the metaverse. I know she's heavily inspired by things like Snow Crash and you know all of the different sci-fi elements to it. So I've been incredibly excited to see what they came out with. I don't know how much of her artwork I owned, but basically however much I owned, I was entitled to mint, I think, about 15 of the brokers for 0.35 each. And then somehow I was able to claim one. I don't know how I got that. That's cool though. And then I bought a couple more and I sent some to, I think, my girlfriend, and I'm sending one to a buddy for watching my dogs this weekend when I get home. He's made out pretty well on that one.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. I'm really excited about the project. I know people have been disassembling their
brokers
on their brokers, and like, because I noticed early on, like they're wearing underwear and like they're wearing things that you can't see. They have hidden traits underneath of them, and you know the nature of SVG is you can kind of remove these layers.
You can take those layers off. So okay, because that's sort of what I'm trying to get at. Is I think I understand the ideological play around this of like, hey, this feels, you know, important as like a true collector if you truly believe in the ethos of this decentralization. But for folks, maybe these newcomers who like don't care, you know, they're like, oh, whatever, I wasn't part of the early Bitcoin, I'm not a libertarian, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, you know, what are some of these other kind of practical, tangible benefits that come from this? And you know, some of that is like just surprises, right? Like, hey, you can kind of
well, like you
take
could
this
like
apart and see.
You could play Barbie. I mean, you could dress or
that's
undress
what I was getting
your...
at earlier with like, oh, I could put a, you know, if I want my whatever rock band that I like T-shirt on them, now I can do that and kind of dress them up like a Barbie. Feels like something you can't really do.
It would be even easier for a CyberBroker than an Avastar since they have like a full body and they're wearing clothes and things like that. Avastars, by the way, I believe is working with Nifty Tailor to drop a collection of clothing pretty soon for Avastars. But in the case of CyberBrokers, I've seen people like undress the brokers and then like place their outfits and stuff. Kind of like, I know, like, my sister used to have, like, these
like Polly
2D
Pockets or
I think that's exactly what it is, where you could, like, had the sticker books that re-stick the stuff, and you can dress them up. So that's kind of what it reminds me of, but, like, a really, like, cyberpunk version of that, like, on the internet. And I honestly don't know what I haven't looked to see or asked what their, like, roadmap is, but it seems like there's, like, a lot going on underneath the surface of CyberBrokers. So not only, like, the dressing, like, being able to dress and undress them and having hidden traits underneath, but they also have professions, and, like, they have, like, skills, and
what you're telling me is I need to get Josie on the pod.
Yes, and, like, figure out what's going on there. And then, like, I noticed the backgrounds weren't, like, mapped as a trait either. So there's, like, some different, like, puzzle stuff. Like, the other thing is like, Josie is good friends with Coin Artist, who's a big crypto puzzler. She did some of the first, like, paintings that contain puzzles to be solved in the crypto sphere. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's something deeper going on there as well. I mean, I know that, like, someone just actually today or recently, this last week, uncovered a riddle in the Larva Labs. There was a Meebit sitting in a wallet, and the Larva Labs put a secret code in one of the projects that they did recently, and someone decoded it, went and found the private key, went and claimed the Meebit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's a tweet out there.
Fun. All these Easter eggs.
I know. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if Josie and Ben have done some stuff like that.
Yeah, I know she has a puzzle component. I don't know the details of it. She's got awesome lore. Like,
yeah, I think there's going to be a lot coming here. This is not just a drop, and you know, there's no rug aspect to any of this, right? Like, I think we're going to see this project. They've been working on it for a year already. I think CyberBrokers is going to be around as a prominent project for a couple of years.
Awesome. Okay, let's transition to Yuga Larva Labs. Did you did you have inside scoop that this was going to be happening beforehand?
No, I heard something like the day before, but the person I heard it from, it was, this can't be true.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, I heard this, but there's no way. Right. And it's like, nah, that shit ain't true.
Okay, so, and let's level set here. I said this at the beginning. You own a ton of Bored Apes. I mean, your apes, didn't you do was it Sotheby's or Christie's? Like, you had a whole sale of a ton of these apes that came from your collection.
One.
You sold one, through Sotheby's.
Yeah,
from
the
your
golden
collection.
ape, yeah.
The golden ape.
Yep.
You own a ton of apes. You own a bunch of punks. You own a ton of Meebits. Like, you know, you're kind of
mutants,
heavy.
dogs, yeah.
You're heavy in all these ecosystems.
Quite a, what is now called a Yuga Labs portfolio, right?
So what was your initial reaction to this news?
I am very excited because I have not been happy with the way, personally, I've not been happy with the way that Larva Labs has handled a lot of the stuff. I mean, they really...
Just being so hands-off, is that really, or...
Yeah, so hands-off and very emo and out of touch, and maybe like, you know... It's an air of superiority that even if they don't intend to put off, like,
it does feel like they're all like on beaches sipping margaritas, like we've made our money.
Was not at all happy with their Dutch auction of Meebits and selling them at an average of like 2.45 ETH a piece. You know, they extracted $70 million from the community that day, and as far as I can tell, have done very little to put any of that back in. So they're basically... It's funny because they're considered so OG and they did so much good stuff with CryptoPunks. And I respect what they did, but like people talk about celebrities coming in and extracting like from the community, like, oh God. My friend, WereKitty, made a comment yesterday that Larva Labs like successfully, I forget what she said, but anyways, like they actually just rugged and left, right? Like they just left. Yeah. Like they actually did a sale. What she did, Larva Labs is the only ones so far who have succeeded in selling their project twice. So they did their sale to the community, and then they just sold all their assets to Yuga and Larva Labs, and they're just walking off into the sunset. So I think that Yuga is showing themselves to be good stewards for the space so far. They're taking what they're doing and their position in the space very seriously. I have a lot of respect for Guy Oseary. He's one of my investors. He was a lead investor in one of our seed rounds, and I think that he has a very good vision for what Yuga Labs could become, along with their CEO and their co-founders and everything else. So I believe in people, and I believe that what they're doing is worthwhile and good. I love the project. I think that the ape token should be coming soon.
So, okay, let's get into like what you think, and I think this ties into Ape Token, like what they might be planning to do with all this. I saw somebody speculating there's no royalties on Meebits or Punks, right? So this isn't a money play for.
Well, yeah. Do we know if they may add royalties? I don't know.
So they could. So as things stand right now, Meebits and Punks, there aren't secondary royalties on that.
Yeah.
But in theory, you're saying so Yuga could come in and add royalties to both these collections. And make
I'm not sure like technically like how easy or hard that would be, but yes, my assumption would be yes.
Okay. I was also seeing somebody say with Ape Coin coming out at some point in the not too distant future, like you may be the only way to buy. You've got this Punks platform, this Meebits platform. The way to buy those will be through Ape Coin.
That would be. So I think there should be a choice, obviously, but yes, I think that there's going to be. I don't know what it will be yet. I noticed they bought like 400 Punks and like 1,500 Meebits or some crazy 1,700. Yeah, so they have a lot of assets that, and they don't have a lot of like. Yuga themselves don't have a lot of apes or anything. Like most of those are in the hands of the community. I'm not sure if they'll want to hold on to those assets and try to use that IP for their own, or if they're going to maybe make some portion of those available through like ape tokens and things like that, where you can maybe go in and buy these things only with ape, like some sort of exclusivity there.
That's a good point. You can't force that on me who owns a Meebit. You can't force me to only sell it in ape coin.
Right.
Yeah.
But you could say the Yuga Labs ones, you could say you could buy this with ape and then give immediate like, the key to I think any sort of token is that like making sure that there's like good, cool stuff to spend it on, I guess, is like the easiest way to say it. And like, if I can buy Punk or Apes or Meebits with the Ape token that I've earned through holding my apes, like that's pretty cool if I believe in the long term of those projects, which I obviously do.
Yeah.
But I think the key there will also be the community, by and large, embracing ape token and like figuring out if there's value for them, being able to bring over this community of Yuga Labs projects, like getting the community's attention by selling things in ape and stuff like that. I think that's a decentralized aspect of this could be really cool as well.
And at the risk of stating the obvious, Yuga didn't buy autoglyphs. They only bought Punks and Meebits, which I think it gives us a clear indication of where their head is. And Gaio's here, right? Like this is an IP play, and it tells me we're making movies, we're making TV, we're making all these things that you're probably not making with autoglyphs, but that you very well can make with Punks and Meebits. Like it's not just a brand play, because you could turn autoglyphs into like a merch brand if you just wanted to do a brand.
The other part of that to take into consideration is that autoglyphs may have been cost prohibitive to acquire because Laravel owns 128 of those. They minted 25% of their own project on that one.
Got it.
And those are 150 ETH, north of 150 ETH apiece. And yes, you're right. They don't have like any real use in the metaverse right now, except for some pretty bland wallpaper.
Right. Again, like you could make a sweatshirt brand out of it, or if you wanted to go that play, but I think
going the PFP route and like characters in the metaverse and valuable IP to like merchandise and license and things like that. I don't think autoglyphs hits the same marks that Punks and Meebits to a lesser extent.
So I'm a Meebit holder, right? So as a Meebit holder, I would imagine as a Punks holder, I think the news has been well received. I think most people are really excited about this.
Some aren't, but yeah, most people understand that like they were also feeling a little bit of angst towards like Laravel Labs and stuff.
I see it like, NFT NYC, Bored Apes had so much going on. They were sort of like the belle of the ball in terms of the yacht party and the this and the that, and there was so much there was such a notable absence of anything Laravel Labs in terms of building that community. And so of course, there are going to be people who feel all sorts of different ways about it, but I think by and large, it's well received. I'm happy about it. I'm glad Yuga's taking it over.
Yep, I've seen most of the OG Punks guys have been, at least cautiously optimistic about owning their IP and stuff.
Do the ape folks feel the same way? And I'll say, as I ask that, I think it's this really interesting question, which is, in this new world, how much... This is great for Yuga Labs, in theory, right? They now have this whole new body of IP. But as an ape holder, I don't own a piece of Yuga Labs. But I think sometimes in this new world order, people kind of see things as proxy for other things, right? ENS tokens are sort of seen as proxy ownership of ENS, even though they're like kind of not, right? It's just really governance. But there's a lot of that getting conflated, and I'll be interested to see how that plays out in the long term. How do apes holders feel? Do they see this as a win for them? Obviously, they use ape token.
I'm not sure I've spoken to enough of them to like get an informed opinion on that. But like from my point of view, I think it's cool. As long as it doesn't dilute like how much ape token I'm going to be getting, right? Because look, I own a lot of Meebits too. I own a few CryptoPunks. So if that happened, I would be getting some from those assets too. But hopefully they're just dropping it to ape, mutant, and dog holders, and then there'll be other ways maybe in the future. So I mean, there's so much potential here though. Like, I don't know what the design is of the ape token, but you know, there could be ways that Meebit holders and punk holders could earn ape as well. I hope so too. I mean,
my sake,
I wouldn't want them to be on the initial thing.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like,
you still need to give the
it would be really
more
cool.
benefit.
I mean, I think getting everybody and making them feel a part of this, like you're bringing together like the newer, really successful collectors in the form of punk or ape holders, and then you got the older OG NFT collectors that have made it, you know, before then. They have been a little bit in conflict. I mean, I kind of helped start the apes flip punks narrative some months back because I saw that Yuga Labs was killing it and they were making the right moves and they had done the IP thing and they just got it, and Larva Labs was just missing it and sitting over here being their superior selves that I perceived them to be, right? So I was like, man, I just see like such a contrast here, and that's why I thought apes would flip punks. But now punks and Meebits have the opportunity to like participate in like a company, Yuga Labs, who really gets it, you know, in a different level. You know, you can't fault Larva Labs for the technology innovations they've done and pushing the space forward in that way. As cultural, and culturally they really have like missed like the mark though.
They haven't done the community ethos, like that kind of building, but when you look at it, obviously punks being punks and innovative for all the reasons that punks is innovative, autoglyphs, you know, being this sort of on-chain thing that was inspirational.
Inspired me, yeah.
Meebits being it's 3D, it can be in the metaverse. Like they have been so spot on in terms of the technological innovation.
It's like, and it's so hard to like.
And I think they sort of feel like, yeah, we can rest on those laurels. Like that's what we do.
And maybe
we
they
don't
can.
do the community side.
Maybe they can.
We'll sell this to the community people, and then
you know, maybe that's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that like probably when they decided a few months ago to sell some version 1 punks,
yeah, that was bad.
that was probably for them when they got the backlash. Which, by the way, they made the absolute wrong move there. It was really stupid, like fucking dumb.
Yeah.
And then of course they caught backlash for it.
Yeah.
And then they probably just were like, fuck this, I'm done.
Yeah, I talked about that in a previous episode if you want to go refresh yourself on the V1, V2
Yeah, there you go.
controversy.
She's got it. She's already got it covered.
Okay, the big kind of initial revelation that has come out of the Yuga acquisition is rights being distributed to holders. Bored Apes were notorious for they gave rights over your ape to the individual holders, full commercial rights. They've now done that with Meebits and Larva Labs. You are notoriously very anti-CryptoPunks. I want to get into like the rights conversation a little bit here. Let's take this piece by piece. What is your reaction to giving the holders rights over their individual Meebits and punks?
Amazing. So Avastars, to come back to Avastars, we designed the digital asset ownership license. You can Google that, you'll see it come up. We gave full commercial rights to Avastar owners back in February 2020 when we launched. So I've always, well, not always, for a long time, I've been in favor of this sort of model for ownership. Going back again to CryptoKitties, I felt like we were breeding them. As me, the breeder, these were my art tools, the cats themselves, and the outcome was like my creation, so I felt like I should have ownership over it and decide what to do. But express that through Avastars. And I'm actually one of the people who has leveraged the Yuga Labs, the Bored Apes commercial rights license, and I have a record deal with Universal Music for Kingship. So I've actually exercised this commercial IP, which a lot of people are like, how is it actually really useful? Well, like, yes, it can be. You know, you have to like hustle and find the opportunities, but there are opportunities to license the likenesses of these apes and now punks and Meebits to brands and entities and projects. And Kingship is just the beginning of that.
Well, say a beat more, because there's been a couple. Didn't Timbaland come out?
Yeah.
Is he connected to what you're doing, or he's a totally
separate? No, they did their own thing. They did their own thing.
There's a lot
like,
with apes and music.
Yeah, so
maybe give a beat on just what you're doing, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, so what I did is I licensed 4 of my Bored Apes. It's a golden ape, a blue beams ape, a mutant, and a king crown ape to Universal Music Group and 1022 PM, which is a joint venture. And they are creating music and experiences from these apes. Basically, it's a music group for the
Metaverse native music group
band. Yes. So I've been working alongside them, helping develop the concept and bring that to life. I think you should expect to see more very soon, maybe
Alpha?
this week, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, but I think there's a distinction to be made between you have a right over I have a Meebit, I have full commercial rights over my individual Meebit. That is not the same as having full commercial rights over Meebits, right? And so that's what Yuga has bought is like IP of Punks, IP of Meebits.
Right, which enabled
while there's the
them
ability to commercial rights for individuals.
Yeah, they bought the IP rights from Larva Labs, and then they conveyed those rights down to the individual NFT holders, which is something Larva Labs had not been willing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, and so this brings us to, I'll give a little bit of back color here. I talked about this in a very early episode of this show, but there's a CryptoPunks derivative project called CryptoPunks, which is punks face right or whatever, their heads face right.
Yep,
Funks.
P-H-U-N-K-S.
Yes.
Yes.
P-H-U-N-K-S. All they did was add the H. The head just faces a different way. It's the exact same art otherwise.
Yep.
And Larva Labs went after them and got them delisted from OpenSea and some of the other major kind of platforms, saying this is a copyright violation.
Yep.
And this like totally divided the community. Some people were like, how dare you do that? That's so against the Web3 ethos to go after places. And you have been staunchly anti-funks.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, like, first of all, like, where in the Web3 ethos is it to just like steal other people's shit and to like claim it as your own and sell it? Like, where is that the fucking ethos, right? Like, no, that's not the ethos. Blockchain strengthens all of our laws and allows us to enforce them more easily. It doesn't.
You can visibly see that a funk is not a punk in the contract.
Yeah, and you can also track the provenance of this art back to the original. Like, I think it's silly, the people who make the arguments that like we don't have to follow the laws because the blockchain, like because of this decentralization Web3, and that for somehow like the Web3 ethos doesn't follow like copyright laws, for example. Like you can actually like assign copyright, and you can have like automatic mechanisms to enforce some of these things now built into smart contracts. It's actually easier to enforce than it was before with digital assets, not harder. And so these people are just it's a misunderstanding of what's going on in the space. It's naivety, but then like taken to an extreme that's not like actually in my mind productive in any way.
Is there a form of derivative art that copies like an entire project? Like, could there have been somebody who copied punks? Have there been projects maybe that have copied punks that have felt artistically significant enough to you that you like it? Or in general, you're like, great, go do what you want with your individual punk, but copying the projects writ large.
I haven't seen any derivative punk projects that were like anything that I would ever touch with a 10-foot pole, like ever. Yeah. Like from baby punks to left-facing punks to right, like it doesn't matter. It's all like taken from the Punks project, and there's only one original Punks, and that's the CryptoPunks that Larva Labs just purchased, and anything else is not as authentic, or it's definitely not an original idea, and I don't think that they will have any significant value in the long run compared to a real CryptoPunk.
And what do you think about CCO projects? Think about Blitmaps, right? Who have intentionally said, go do whatever you want, we have no copyright enforcement.
Yeah, I think that CCOs, first of all, I want to go on the record and say, I think CCO is cool. Like, it's cool to be able to release your work into the public domain. Like, very cool. I don't think that there is a great deal of value that is created for the collector in doing that. I think you would potentially give the collector themselves so much more value by giving them the commercial rights to that IP rather than saying anybody can use it for anything. Because if anybody can use it for anything, someone could start the new Nazi party and use your NFT's image as that. Like, that's what CCO enables, right? Like, is you could use it, anybody can use it for anything. And the idea there is like, cool, like your NFT is like this really unique circle with a red dot in the middle of it, and now like anybody can go make like really cool circles with red dots anywhere, and it can get really popular and become a meme, and then you own that circle with the red dot, which is so cool because people are gonna wanna buy that because it's the original thing of it all. Man, like how pissed off would I be if like my golden captain ape, if that was CC0 and people were out there printing fucking t-shirts and selling them, and like they were making money off of the image of my ape, and I wasn't getting anything from that. But isn't that cool that I can maybe sell it for more money later because all these people have t-shirts? Fuck that. Like, that is the dumbest shit I've ever heard.
That's funny. So I think the argument, right, there's an argument the next Beethoven will come along, you know, like that there are people who maybe don't have the original idea, right, but get inspired by the flip maps or blip maps, sorry, flip maps being a derivative of blip maps, right? And
I own some blip maps and stuff, by the way.
Okay, yeah. And this is where I tend to fall on it, is that, and I've talked about it a lot on the show because I think it's a fascinating debate, and I'm so eager to see how it'll play out.
I'm fascinated about it too, yeah.
It's what do you want to make a bet on, right? Like, I want to make a bet on Gary Vee. I don't want that man to give up an ounce more rights than he needs to, because I trust his ability to execute.
Yeah.
But there are super talented people around the world who maybe aren't creating a Genesis concept, but could go and take and make Blipmap something really interesting. And I think I like the idea of having some exposure to that. Now, I think that most CCO projects, like, aren't going to turn into that, right? Like, Blitmaps is a unique one because you've got Dom Hoffman. Like, you have a real community there that's really excited about it. And Crypto, I think you've got a couple standout projects that are CCO that have enough sort of notoriety and in a positive way and communities that people could go make really interesting things there. And I think it's interesting to have bets on both. But I tend to kind of.
I'm not convinced that, like, for example, I know the cryptos have a lot of, like, you know, good community behind it and everything, but I'm not convinced that there's anything of tangible value there if it's CCO, because I don't have to own any cryptos and I can go do anything with it. And I could make it so that it doesn't even look anything like any of those original ones and gives no value to anything that they've done there, other than like some like intangible. I don't know. My point is that, like, the incentives are not properly aligned with CC0. There's no proper incentives for owners to, like, there's no protection of your rights of that image, and anybody can do anything with it. So, like, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever the rest of the fucking world wants to do. Yeah. Right? And, like, since when has the world been organized enough to, like, do anything intentional, like, the right way?
We should do a panel. Would you be down for a panel if we got, like, Dom Hoffman or Gremplin, if they were down to, like, kind of have a debate about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that would actually be so interesting.
The one thing I'm not interested in doing at all is having any debate with any of the Funks guys. They don't even deserve to have a stage.
I really have very little say. I would be more interested in, like, a Dom or, like, a Gremplin or somebody.
The people that are, like, that have taken over that Funks community too have been, like, really bad actors in the space and been spreading a lot of false narratives about, like, Yuga Labs being, like, Nazis, when in fact they're all immigrants and it's a woman-run company. And, you know, there's a lot of, like, really negative stuff coming from the Funks community. So I would say, like, please don't support them.
Yeah.
They're not good actors.
Yeah, and you've been really vocal about that, I know, on Twitter, and I know all of that history.
Yeah, and I'm not perfect, but, like, I try to be transparent and open, and, you know, my intentions should be pretty clear. So, you know,
I'll be curious too. I don't know if you've thought about this. You mentioned Guy Osiri. So Guy reps. Does he rep all of? He reps, like, Yuga, because he also reps. Does he rep?
World of Women?
And World of Women, of course. But
I don't think
Jenkins in LA is repped by CAA. So this is what I find interesting, and I'll be interested in how this plays out, because Punks are repped by UTA. Oh, so that's now done.
They don't own it anymore. Larva
but
Labs?
Punks, it wasn't just Larva. I thought Punks, specifically the collection Punks, was repped by UTA, not Larva Labs.
Wouldn't be anymore, though, because that was through Larva Labs.
Does that automatically dissolve the contract?
They don't have anything to represent anymore because Larva Labs doesn't own Punks anymore. They don't own the IP. The IP was the value. That's what they were representing. That IP's been sold. From my understanding, like, those agents were potentially involved in trying to find a deal, but I don't think the actual deal that went down.
Because that was what I was curious about. Like, does that representation transfer over? And then you've got, like, CAA representing Jenkins, UTA representing Punks, Guy representing
I don't think CAA is representing Punks anymore, if I had to guess. I would say at this point, it's under Guy's guys.
Okay, it's all Guy.
Yeah.
And you're bullish on what Guy will be able to build for all of these, and he's got a vision.
Super bullish on Guy. Mr. Guy Osiri.
Okay.
Yes.
Any final things? I think we're kind of heading towards time here. Other things you want to note on any of this on-chain are the Yuga Labs acquisition.
Well, I mean, I'm excited for the space now. I mean, I've been excited for the space, but we went through a period here over the last couple of months where I think maybe a lot of us were feeling some fatigue, just in general, like too many collections coming out, too much of the same stuff, not a whole lot of innovation. And I really feel like with the more brands starting to come in, we're going to start to see more mainstream focus. Yuga Labs leading the way in a lot of those ways, creating partnerships. You have things like what I'm doing with like Kingship, and Timberland's doing with his stuff, and Jenkins the Valet's doing with their IP. I think now we might see some really cool stuff with Meebits and Punks coming out. There's been like J1mmy, for example, has an
game.
Ape. Well, he has an ape. Well,
okay.
but he has an ape. Yeah, he does have a game, but he had this ape, and he never knew like if he could really use that image as his likeness. But now, like J1mmy can be like that CryptoPunk ape, and he can commercialize that further, right? Yeah, the ape punk, and that's like I think going to be really cool to see like that sort of stuff.
And he just said, I actually just emailed him, I'm trying to get him on the show because he was like, game coming. Now that I have my punk, here's the game. I'm doing with it.
Love to hear that.
He's like, he's like, it's dropping. I think this week, today actually. I think he said it was gonna. I don't know. We'll have to look at it.
Yeah, I was supposed to link up with him this weekend. He's one of the people we've not been able to find or be in the same space at the same time, basically.
Yeah. He's all over the place. In terms of he's traveling around. Awesome. And then I have one final question. We'll have to have you back on to talk about Nameless. Like we didn't even really get into the full brunt, spectrum of everything that you've done in this space.
There's just too much stuff.
Anything on Nameless you want to kind of mention? Is there anything about Gary's dropping VF2? I don't know if I'm assuming you guys were involved in that. Has there been anything with like VFriends that has like surprised you?
I will say that like we've spoken to Gary a lot recently about VFriends 2, and I've been really impressed yet again with Gary is a very interesting person, and it's not always obvious like what he's doing when he's doing it. Like VFriends and talking about Series 2, I didn't know what that would look like, and he dropped the book game stuff, and you don't know how all this stuff fits into everything, but I love how Gary's taking care of the community that he's built already for VFriends 2 as well. I'm super excited for VCon. Like, I'm speaking at the event.
I think I am. Well, okay,
hopefully.
I am, but I don't. Actually, that hasn't come out yet. So
okay.
Sorry, VFriends.
Yeah.
I just blew
awesome.
that.
Cool. And then like.
Well, I'm moderating. I don't.
I think that's going to be like the standout event this year for NFTs, VCon, and I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited for Series 2. Believe that we are involved in that one. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, really excited to be continue to work with Gary. Gary is an amazing figure in this space, and it's been a very fortuitous relationship for Nameless.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. Truly, I would love to have you back on. And again,
fortuitous?
We didn't even get to.
Sorry, it's been a very fruitful relationship for Nameless.
Would you say fortuitous?
Fortuitous.
That kind of was true
thing?
too. Well, no, it's not the same. But kind of, it's amazing how we found each other and were symbiotic, and it was fortuitous in that way. Like that worked.
Sure. Okay.
They both worked. Fruitful too.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it. Truly though, talk about Nameless. Again, we kind of scratched the surface of Kingship, but there's so much you have and that you think about, and we didn't even get to talk about how you think about investing and things that I'm sure people would be eager to hear about. So
sure, but I'm glad that we had an opportunity to talk about on-chain today. That's
near
and dear to my heart, and
I know it is,
I really appreciate that you collect Avastars and you understand what it is that we did there, and I'm just so grateful for that community and everybody who collects those, and I'm really excited about CyberBrokers. They're carrying that torch forward and maybe even making it a little brighter. And I'm excited to see what other projects adopt this same ethos over time.
Yeah. Well, and Avastars has a really diehard community. I think our friend Kai, had at one point done a look at percentage of holders who minted who are still holding a project.
Yeah.
And it was Avastar holders and VFriend holders, I think, were the two. Yeah. You have had your hands all over both, right? In terms of that community, people minted and have stayed with those projects.
Yeah.
Which is,
and it's a lot of people's first NFT. I mean, they've been inexpensive enough that they've made great gifts as well for people coming into the space. You can give them an Avastar and introduce them to it, and then if they want to get really into it, they can buy another one and then do the replicant creation and learn.
And that's so fun when you look at the traits and you're like, okay, what am I going to buy now so that I can make a replicant that's X, Y, or Z? Or that's really
and that goes back to the CryptoKitties. We were making stuff and solving puzzles and stuff. So that aspect kind of made its way into Avastars. Yeah, we don't see a lot of that today in projects.
No, and I definitely fell down that rabbit hole with Avastars, which was fun for me, being too late for CryptoKitties.
Yep.
Well, thank you. We will do it again. And I want to give a huge shout out to Emergent Order. They are the ones at the space we're in right now. Really grateful for them carving out some time for us here in Austin to have this conversation. And Dad Saves America is the podcast that's produced out of here. I want to give them a shout out too. Thank you for lending us your space for this afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much.
Hey, we hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, head over to Bankless HQ right now to develop your crypto investing skills and learn how to free yourself from banks and gain your financial independence. We recommend joining our daily newsletter, podcast, and community as a Bankless Premium subscriber to get the most out of your Bankless experience. You'll get access to our market analysis, our alpha leaks, and exclusive content, and even the Bankless token for airdrops, raffles, and unlocks. If you're interested in crypto, the Bankless community is where you want to be. Click the link in the description to become a Bankless Premium subscriber today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for in-depth interviews with industry leaders, Ask Me Anythings, and weekly roll-ups where we summarize the week in crypto and other fantastic content. Thanks everyone for watching and being on the journey as we build out the Bankless Nation.